Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. This is Gemini Brett here with a transmission of personal astrological event, just because I had such a literal experience of a transit that's happening right now. I'm going to show you the chart. And for those of you who are astrologically inclined, I'll let you guess. So let's just take a peek at that first. Here it was this morning, last night, call it what you will, 12:15 a.m. At home, Richmond, California. So 12:15 a.m., March 9th, 2022. This is my nativity in the inner wheel and that transit at that time last night, this morning, when an event happened. So if you are watching this live, you probably saw the name of the video, which is What Happened When Mars... Let's get a little pointer device. What happened when Mars opposed Saturn? All right, and you can see actually at that time, Venus is, I guess, more geometrically aligned, though Venus is separating from the opposition with natal Saturn at the time. Mars is applying to it, right? So 17 arc minutes away from perfecting and transiting opposition to natal Mars. And you see all sorts of other things. Some of you will be inclined to see maybe first a nodal reversal happening, that the moon, as she does every month, is about to cross my ascendant and then soon return, for those two beings of my nativity are in the same sign. Some of you might be really interested to see that the midheaven was at my natal Venus, the sun at the IC at the time. Of course, that makes sense. It's the middle of the night and the sun traveling with Jupiter and Pisces. I mean, what else do you see? Perhaps if we're tuning into Mars and Venus opposing natal Saturn, we shouldn't sleep on the truth that in the natal chart, Sun and Saturn are square, with an interesting, perhaps, reception story going on, because Saturn is staying in the Sun's house called Leo. And Saturn in this square, it's called the Dexter square, the opening square of the Sun-Saturn cycle, is overcoming the Sun, to use a traditional term. What is that about? What about the Sun-Saturn square in the nativity and the Sun-Mars trine in the nativity, right? How does Mars-Saturn inspire that in some ways? And of course, we see this transiting Venus-Mars conjunction in these early degrees of Aquarius, not only opposing Saturn, but squaring the natal Sun, Uranus. Uranus, sudden things, right? And so kind of creating a T square in the transiting chart and with the nativity. Maybe even a grand cross with Uranus there in Taurus. But Uranus moves so slowly, the Uranus opposition it's kind of, in some ways, come and gone. Okay, so what happened and why now? Okay, and this, you may have seen in the description of the video, is like, this is a literal transit, okay? And Mars can sometimes be scary, right? I'm okay. So does anyone want to guess? I feel like I should find the page and just tune into the comments for those of you who are tuning in live and see if there's any words coming onto the screen. I'm not positive I can even see that. Oh yeah, I see some mornings and greetings from New Zealand. Thank you. But I'm not sure. Let's see, is this thing on? Does anyone want to venture a guess? All right, so maybe not. I will let you know. Did you know that Saturn is said to rule the bones? Skin as well, interestingly, which is cool, right? Because the bones are like the skeleton, right? That's very Saturnian, foundations in that. And the skin is something that separates you from me, and Saturn in many regards is about boundaries, yeah? So perhaps since I went straight to the bones, this has to do with my bones. Well, it has to do with the tips of my bones, which is a term I've heard in Qigong for the teeth, that the teeth are the tips of the bones. So Saturn is said to rule the teeth, if you don't mind that kind of old language. Usually for rulership, I prefer to say guide. But when it's like this part of the body corresponds with the planet, I feel like that rule word does probably the right thing. So teeth, and I have Saturn in Leo, which you may know is not said to be his happy place. Now, there's some actual argument about whether Hellenistic astrologers did this thing that later in the medieval times was called exile, or often today, as we say, detriment, right? So a planet in the sign opposite one of its homes. And Saturn traditionally is said to keep a home in Aquarius. And so the opposite sign of Leo is said to be a place of Saturn's detriment or Saturn's exile. The Hellenistic tradition, all we've seen is people saying Saturn in Leo seems okay. And it's interesting to know that in Jyotish astrology or Vedic astrology, detriment isn't a thing. Planetary fall is a big deal, but not the detriment. Yeah, so take it for what you will. In Hellenistic astrology, there's still some confusion about was this something that they were working with or practicing. We certainly see that they were speaking about planets in the sign of their fall, but we don't really see so much about this detriment thing, to my understanding. I'm not as well read as I'd like to be. So Mars separates, right? And can bring sudden things. You know, when we say sudden these days in modern astrology, typically we think Uranus, sudden change, sometimes accidents snapping us into the moment now. But a lot of that traditionally is like Mars realm. I like to talk about the Tower card, and specifically the Rider-Waite version of the Tower card with clients when they're experiencing a Uranus transit. And my kitschy thing is choose change before change chooses you, which I very much see in this illustration of the Tower. As you can see, I'm seeking an image. There you go. I feel like one's jumping and one's falling. But anyway, I associate this often with Uranus. You can see the lightning bolts and such, but traditionally, and not that traditionally, but in the Golden Dawn system, and this is one of their, I don't know, beings cards, Alfred E. Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith. That was a card that was associated with Mars. So Mars can be sudden traumas and is separation. So probably by now you have guessed that I had a tooth separate. It used to live there. Now, importantly, there's still a little bit of tooth because I don't know when it was. Actually, it might have been about 30 years or 29 and a half years ago, or like a Saturn cycle ago, that I had a root canal here. So there's no pain. Like I don't have any nerves in this place. I've had a crown. There you go. Right? And for the past while, it's been fading. And the last few months, I'm wishing I had heeded some dentist's advice over the course of the last couple, maybe even few years, to go see an oral surgeon about it because it looks gnarly in the film. But like in the last few months, I've been able to kind of feel the bottom of the crown and wondering what that is. Is that a tooth cracking, or I don't know? And there's definitely been some crazy like blackening. And now I'm hoping, though I love Mercury so much, that that's not Mercury, or even if it is, that there's not Mercury in the bottom. And if any of you out there are dentists and you know about these things, and if you could let me know if that's probably just like aluminum or something else they use in crowns, I'd appreciate it. I will be seeing a dentist soon, but part of what I'm exploring right now is, should I do that before I leave for Mexico, which is happening on Wednesday, or well, Tuesday, or when I get back on like the 27th or 28th. And I'm going to explore that a little bit today, and thought I'd bring you along with me in case you are interested in seeing I don't know, some of the ways that I astrologize, and I would love to hear anything you see and receive your advice. So if you see something I'm missing or something that you'd like to add, please add it to the comments, whether you're watching this live or at some time that I perceive to be the future. What is time? What an amazing thing. Saturn. So why do I say that? I have cups for the planets. Astrology readings, you know. Thanks to my dear friend Boo for co-creating these with me. And I always pour tea for spirit. So, I mean, my practice for a long time is to kind of been to draw a cup for myself and see what planet wants to teach me, and then draw a cup for spirit. And the spirit gets to drink first. Okay, then me. Recently, actually, and it's been a while, I've been pouring tea into my Saturn and my Jupiter cups. And then I drink from the Mercury cup. And I asked Jupiter to do a certain thing for me and Saturn to do a certain thing for me. And then my job is to Mercury. Okay, that's kind of what's happening in my school right now and whatnot. I received a wonderful reading this morning that said, yeah, like turn up the Saturn. Okay. I didn't know that at that time, and I didn't know until maybe you just saw the surprise on my face, that I've been drinking from the Saturn cup today. I washed all the cups yesterday, and suddenly now I'm pouring tea for Mercury and Jupiter over there, and I'm drinking from the Saturn cup. I had no idea. And this probably this morning after this tooth came out, or crown came out, is the first time I have. Now, check this out. If Saturn's the teeth, right, and Saturn wraps around things and serves as a boundary and kind of a protective shell in some regards, and Saturn for me is in Leo, think like royalty. Can you dig how a crown would be like ridiculously Saturn and like Leo Saturn, right? Not such a royal crown, that just clear evidence that I ate too much sugar and didn't floss enough as a child. But regardless, I find this amazing that during this transit where Mars, who separates and sometimes in a traumatic way, is squaring my sun in the 6th house of illness and opposing Saturn, who rules the teeth, that literally I had this crown fall out of my mouth. Now, I want to see, when I was teaching the other day on Sunday, my Earth astrology school this first year is the golden year. So we're following the sun. And so it's Sunday school this year. Probably next year it'll be Moon Day school. But I taught a class on triplicity on elements and temperament on March 6th at 9 a.m. And I'm interested in seeing how close this was to the Jupiter cazimi, which had happened the day before. But the Hellenistic condition for Jupiter cazimi is within 1 degree. And so this Sun-Jupiter conjunction would honor Jupiter in that way, still in the Hellenistic times. And later in the medieval times, it's like much tighter criterion, like 17 arc minutes. And so Jupiter would no longer be considered cazimi. I am confused as to how they would even know a planet is within 17 arc minutes of the sun. Actually, I'm convinced they could not. But regardless, Jupiter here from a Hellenistic point of view is cazimi. And the reason why I wanted to go to this time, and maybe even like an hour later, let's see, so Taurus, and Uranus was rising when I started the class, although honestly, I started a little bit late. It was probably around 10 a.m. and maybe this Gemini rising time when I started feeling this crown wiggle. And I was trying not to freak out. In fact, I didn't say anything about it in the class. I had another 7,000 words to say to get through my million slides about triplicity and temperament. But I started feeling this thing wiggling or like clicking around. I was like, oh, golly, okay, this is happening. I've been feeling like this like bottom part of it with my tongue for a while now and concerned, and finally like booked an appointment with this oral surgeon over there in Marin. But like I'm not on the books until June for an evaluation and July for the surgery, which is probably just pulling my tooth, right? Because I can either get it root canaled again, to my understanding. Like they're gonna have to clean some stuff out. Or like pull it, wait for that to heal, and then maybe get an implant or maybe not. Is this TM? I think she's okay with me. My beloved Anna has the same tooth missing, but on the other side. So now we have like matching teeth. And interestingly, because this will come into our story here a little bit, it is very possible that Anna's sister-in-law, who is a dentist not too far away, south of here in San Jose, will be the one who pulls my tooth. So the dentist I've been seeing for a bit, and the one before, they don't pull teeth. That's just, they don't do it. They send patients to the oral surgeon. But Anka, Anna's sister-in-law, does. And so it's super nice to have that potential resource. I'm also very grateful to her because after I ended the class on Sunday and like we did some weeding out here, I like mowed the lawn and then we went to the park together. I was like freaked out about my loose tooth is what I was calling it. And Anna's like, you should talk to Anka, her sister-in-law, the dentist. And so I did. And she said, well, is it the tooth that's loose or the crown? And oh, it's the crown. And so she kind of talked me off the ledge a bit. I can be a bit of a hypochondriac. I mean, I'm generally a very mercurial, I don't know if high strung, but like nervous person. I try to sit with that. And I think I do a pretty good job, but I can be a hypochondriac. So it was nice to have some comfort. And the next day I arranged for some film to get sent down to her office. And but last night I just sent a bunch of pictures of a crown in my hand and the new hole in my mouth and these things, because I had yesterday kind of resolved to this. I'm about to head to Mexico, land of so many things, including tortilla chips, and probably having like an open wound where a tooth was just pulled and the need to keep it clean and not get it stabbed with a chip. It's not the way I want to roll in Mexico. And I'm like touring around and receiving shadow serpents at pyramids and teaching class and leading folks through pyramid sites and whatnot. So yesterday I kind of resolved, why not wait till I get back? And then things got wiggly last night when I flossed, and there goes the crown, right? Okay. So I want to show you why I brought Jupiter into this mix and shift this conversation now towards the power of chronocrators or time lords in the ancient systems. And some of you, I'm sure, have started to play with this. I think I'm going to share this video with the Astrology Hub Inner Circle community because I taught a profections class for them in November, just after I moved into an 11th house profection. I'll show you what that is, where Mars became the Lord of the year, according to that system. And that makes transits to and transits by Mars like super powered for the year. And there are many other Time Lord systems, and I'll show you a couple of the other ones right now, because, Mars transited Saturn like this 2 years ago. Mars generally takes 2 years to get around the zodiac, 24 to 26 months-ish. I mean, let's actually take a peek at when the Mars-Saturn opposition is now. So we say Mars, thanks to Astro Gold for making this easy, opposite radix or natal Saturn. And the answer is 8:58 a.m., where interestingly, I was receiving a reading, getting some advice about this thing and having a laugh about how literal it all is. You can see that Mars is going to square the natal Uranus so shortly after, because I have this really strong Sun, Saturn, Uranus figure in the nativity. Mercury about to change signs interests me too. So I'm going to go back in time and see, when is the last time Mars opposed Saturn? And the answer is April 3rd, 2020, right? So not long ago. This might have been a time, and it's interesting to see that's right around the time of my Saturn opposition. That's a much more rare thing, since Saturn takes almost 30 years to get around, where for Mars, it's just about 2, right? So this is only the second Saturn opposite, natal Saturn, of my lifetime. The first one happens around 14 and a half, 15 years old. And that was, significant. And so this might have been a time where it was like, hey, deal with that tooth. Right. So I've been dealing with some other teeth, but not the one that I've had to go see an oral surgeon about. Let me just rewind this and show you how frequent it is that Mars will oppose anything in a chart, because his orbit is about 2 years. So here's September 2018, like less than 2 years that time. And some of this is going to have to do with Mars's retrograde periods, right? So I got 3 in 2018. And honestly, that may have been a time when I was kind of first told to go deal with this. I'm actually interested in looking back into my calendar and email and seeing if that's true. I've just started recently keeping a daily journal in like a digital realm called Penzu, where now I can do keywords and like dentist, and it's going to show me all the times I entered that, and show my tarot card of the day and where the transit chart of the day and things like this. Like, I'm really excited to finally have the opportunity to really deeply research astrology, at least moving forward. I wish I've been journaling my whole life. If you're young or not, start doing it now if you haven't already. So this is a really interesting one to see, right? Because we're back at a different Mars opposite Saturn. Obviously the nodes and therefore the eclipses were there at the time. But check out Uranus, right? So this is the time of my Uranus opposite Sun, Uranus opposite Uranus, Uranus square natal Saturn, and Mars was getting in the mix then. And maybe this would have been an opportunity to deal. Okay, but that was then, and this is now. I mostly wanted to rewind time and just show you that when you're looking at Mars transiting a thing, it's not that rare, right? I mean, look, 2 years is not some short period of time. And during those 2 years of Mars getting around the zodiac, Mars will eventually be here in Taurus, squaring my natal Saturn, will conjoin Saturn in Leo, will come to Scorpio and square my Saturn, and all the things, right? But the chronocrator systems of traditional astrology will show me why this Mars-Saturn opposition is particularly strong right now. And I'll share as well that I feel Venus is very significantly involved. Like I'm very interested in, and I'm going to just hopefully, good. Sorry, I was just hoping no client names would pop up when I hit that button. I want to go back to this 12:15 a.m. chart, right? Like I'm interested in seeing my Venus degree was at the local midheaven at the time that the crown fell out. And that this Jupiter, now not Cazimi, and Sun are opposite Venus. And that Cazimi, right? So let me go back to Sun conjunct Jupiter's. Please speak the name of the faster moving planet first. But wrong button. Here we go. Yeah, this was March 5th. So this was Saturday, 6:06 a.m. and very significantly aligned to my Venus, 5 arc minutes away from Venus. Now that's showing up in different places in my life as well. I just want to say that. I mean, at this time I was like nuts about putting together a bunch of pretty pictures for my School of Earth Astrology. Maybe you can hear the Virgo there. And there's other themes too, okay? And Venus, who, like rules the 5th in my nativity and the 12th. Some interesting things there. I don't need to get into it right now. But I mean, one of the most beautiful things about this Jupiter Cazimi, right, Sun-Jupiter conjunction, which is about every 399 days, is that it happened in Pisces, one of the traditional homes of Jupiter, and that there's this Venus-Mars conjunction at the same time. They're applying, but their actual conjunction, they had one Venus conjoined Mars. Actually, Mars conjoined Venus in Capricorn. What's the difference? Speak the name of the faster moving planet first. And since at this time in mid-February 2022, Venus had recently stationed, Venus stationed direct 18 days prior at the end of January, because she had recently stationed, meaning moving from retrograde or reverse to drive direct motion. She was moving very slow. She was still accelerating from stopped. And so Mars was moving faster than Venus. If I go back some days, we'll see that Mars actually comes and Mars passes Venus by. Okay, well, after that time, Venus matched Mars's speed and then accelerated beyond the speed of Mars. And so now their second conjunction grammatically correct to say is a Venus-Mars conjunction. So you want to speak the name of the faster moving planet first, because then you can start seeing where things are coming from and where things are going. Okay. And they conjoined in the first arc minute of Aquarius. I mean, not too far from where Jupiter and Saturn conjoined on December 21st or December solstice 2020. It's a very active degree. Mercury in his recent cycle has been activating that degree as well, which is a sensitive degree for me in my own nativity. Why? Because the sun is in the first degree of another fixed sign of Scorpio. That Sun, Saturn, Uranus figure of my nativity is generally in that zone. Yeah. So, I mean, actually, let me rewind and just show Jupiter conjoined transiting Saturn on that December solstice 2020 and how significantly they were aligned to this figure of my chart. I'm interested to see Mars near my Jupiter at that time, aligned with the moon. And of course, things go on and on and on. And by the way, Mars rules my sixth. Okay, and why do I say that? Sixth, health, illness. All right, so now I'm going to turn this to a whole sign chart because most of us are utilizing the ancient house system, which it seems is whole sign houses, where regardless of the degree of the ascendant, mine is 936 Gemini. We say in this case that Gemini is the first sign and therefore the first house in a whole sign house system. I imagine you've come around and seen whole sign houses before. For me, they speak about part of me that doesn't quite have his or her feet on the ground. That it's a little bit closer to the template of higher self, if you will, of soul, spirit, and that the quadrant house systems, Porphyry, Placidus, what have you, are more feet on the ground, things that are happening on Earth to stimulate the spiritual essence. That's where I'm at with the thing right now. I use many house systems, and I tend to use whole sign houses when I work with the ancient technique of annual monthly profections. And the reason why, there's a couple. One is it's an ancient technique, like goes all the way back to the beginning of our predictive models. And I'll show you a few today. Zodiacal releasing, as we modern students of ancient astrology tend to call it these days. Another Hellenistic technique that we know about from one author, who's Vedius Valens, who wrote the anthology, and one of those books describes this technique of what we now call zodiacal releasing from the special lots of the moon, the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit. That comes into the mix for me at this time. That technique, again, we know about from one author, but from all of the authors, we also understand a traditional technique that's almost completely disappeared, but it's coming back, and I'm a huge fan, which is called primary directions or distributions or circumambulations through the bounds. And I'll show you a bit about that too, and why that indicates some chronocrator timings that has my eyes on Jupiter right now. Okay. So with profections, I prefer to start at least my investigation with whole sign houses, because really it's not such an astronomical thing. And it's not that whole sign houses are not astronomical. I mean, they are, in that the first house of a whole sign house chart is the ascendant. And the ascendant is quite astronomical, right? The ascendant is where the ecliptic, the path of the sun, and therefore mostly for the planets, the heart of the zodiac, where the ecliptic intersects the eastern horizon of Earth, the ascendant, right? That's a very astronomical thing. And even though whole sign houses aren't necessarily like aligning the cusp of that house to the specific ascendant degree, in my case, 936 Gemini, the first sign of a whole sign system is defined by that intersection, or what was rising at the time that, you know, you rose or I rose. I'm using myself for the example here, right? Why? Because my tooth fell out. My crown fell out. Oh, but you know what? I'm going to go back to the Tower card because, you know, this guy's, people often see it like the Tower's crown is flying off. And in some older decks, like the Marseille deck, that's kind of quite clear. But for me, this is like the king had his crown blasted off by that lightning bolt. So it's tower card time for me. I wonder if I can find that in my own timings and interesting astrology, tarot, numerology correlations. And I will be going to look for that. You can imagine. Okay. So profections, right? Not progressions. That's a very different thing. That's like a dilated time system. Profections, which we can do really from any point, and one of the traditional plays was to profect from the special lots of the moon, like lot of fortune, lot of spirit, from the sun and the moon, especially the sect light, which is the sun if you're born by day, or the moon if you're born by night, perhaps from the prenatal syzygy, which is where the moon was at the Earth, moon, sun alignment before your birth. That's the new moon degree, your prenatal new moon degree, if the moon was waxing at the time of your birth, or the full moon degree, if the moon was waning at the time of your birth. That's true for me, my prenatal syzygy. Oh, let me just show you. I'll show you my syzygy chart. I was born with the moon waning, and the moon opposed the sun for full moon at 2611 Aries, pretty close to Chiron before my birth. And you can see Mars had just recently moved from Gemini into Cancer at that time, and Mercury is just applying to Pluto, separating by the time of my birth. All right, so that degree becomes really interesting, and sometimes we will work with timing techniques from there, and I might as well show you since I've just rapped about them. The lot of fortune when I was born is near my Mercury here in Libra on the 5th, and the lot of spirit near my midheaven in the 9th, and certainly the 9th whole sign. All right, so this is a whole sign chart, and profections. Why whole signs? Because again, it's much more of like a counting technique than it is in an astronomical technique. Well, astronomy determines the periodicity of your count. Why? Like if we're doing annual profections, this changes annually, which is obviously an astronomical happening, right? Earth orbiting the sun, or from our point of view, sun orbiting us, getting through all 12 signs and 12 constellations of the zodiac, returning to that place where it was at the time of your birth, right? Not January 1st, not the Pope's years, but my years in this case, or your years, right? So they're timed by solar return. In this chart, Gemini rising, this is a child of Mercury. Mercury is a steersman, and that's the gig for life. However, we also see, if we profect the ascendant, that the ascendant at the first birthday, when we enter the second year of life, will profect into the second sign. The very common mistake with profections, by the way, is that folks forget to begin life at 0, right? When we turn 1, we're actually entering year 2, and the ascendant moves from house 1 to house 2. And so in the second year of my life, it would be considered a second house year. That's true for all of us. For me, what might make that unique, or it's true for all of those with us born with Gemini rising, is that the second sign is Cancer. And so then we say the moon is the lord or the lady of the year. The medieval tradition, there's some suggestions that the lord of the year cannot be a luminary, and then you have to look for a surrogate. And in that case, it might be Mars for me. I don't know. In the Hellenistic tradition, that's not true. And moon would be the lord of the year, the lady of the year, or whatever you prefer, pronominally speaking, of the year. And Mars also gets juice because Mars resides in that sign. There's some significant debate about which one matters more, or is it 50-50 or what? I tend to go with the so-called ruler of the sign and also look to these beings, okay? So when I turn 2 and enter my third year of life, it's a sun year because my third sign is Leo, and Saturn is also signified because Saturn resides in the sign, okay? And then the next year, Virgo, so Mercury, but Venus is there. And the next year, Libra, so Venus, but Mercury's there. Maybe I'd consider Pluto the lot of fortune as well. The next year, Scorpio. I tend to go traditional with the dispositors, especially when I use traditional techniques. So that would be a Mars year. and then Sag in a Jupiter year and like that. And it's a 12-year system. And so where I currently am in that 12-year system, as of my solar return, October 20, it was actually 23rd, 2021, when I turned 46, is I am in an 11th house year. And my 11th is Aries. And so it said that Mars is the Lord of the year for me. And I'm also very interested in Jupiter, who resides in the sign, which is one of the reasons why I was tuning into that Jupiter Cazimi and Jupiter opposing Venus now. There's another reason that I will show you. And maybe Lilith and Chiron as well. I mean, it's definitely when I'm using traditional techniques, I tend to stick with traditional planets, but I also honor that there's other beings in the nativity that do things, okay? And I mean, maybe this is a Chironian experience. Maybe this is a very Aries experience, because here I am, talking about myself. I like to use myself as a chart example when I'm teaching, because I'm the only person I could really even kind of know. What do I know about James Dean, Marilyn Monroe? Anyway, so I'm currently, as of my solar return, and I will show you the solar return chart, and when I look at this, I start always with the birthplace. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. So my solar return in 2021, October 23rd, 11:25 p.m. The ascendant is Leo with Saturn. And you notice that degree. That's interesting to see. That would be different where I live and where I was here at home during my solar return. 3 hours earlier by time zone, right? But that's an interesting thing to see in Moon at the Ascendant. There's so much more. But I was very interested in Leo rising, which brings our eyes to the sun. And I have a 6th sign sun. And so there's some interesting health considerations. Also, that I'm in an 11th house year. So you can think of this also kind of like, this is what I do. I'm like, all right, well, if the ascendant's profected to Aries, then what's the Aries rising chart look like? Where Mars in my nativity, who's in fall in Cancer, then is in the 4th from Aries. So I just call that Mars in the 4th of the 11th. Okay, so I start at the 11th, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. In the solar return chart, which we use in, conjunction is an interesting word, but in conjunction, we see Mars here in Libra. Okay, and near the IC at the time, and I could go on and on and on. What was the piece that I wanted to show? I guess I had remembered finding health considerations in my chart in a different way before, but I'm going to leave that there for now. Okay, so Mars is extra active for me this year. It's interesting to see, by the way, Mars at opposite my natal, or my syzygy, which I just showed was at 26 Aries, and opposite my natal Chiron at the time of the solar return, when I moved from a Pisces Jupiter year, 10th house year, to an Aries Mars year, 11th house year, with Jupiter in that sign. So that's going to keep me tied into themes of work, 10th sign, to themes of relationships, 7th sign. But Mars takes over in 11th house themes of hopes and dreams and community, extra important. And, one of the ways that I've worked with all of these symbols magically was to start my school of astrology, which I am seeing slowly blossom into the dream of having a place for new community of fellow astrological seekers. If you're looking for that, join the school. It's not too late. We've only had 6 classes so far. You could get caught up pretty quick. GeminiBrett.com/courses and check out the golden year of Earth astrology. All right. Where do I want to be with this now? Well, I want to be now. So profections, interestingly, also have a monthly correspondent, and some use daily profections as well, but as all things astrology, many ways to pet the cosmic cat. There's many different systems of how to do daily profections. I've invented a couple, or I thought I had until I realized they've been around, which is not the first time. Although I've been doing them whole sign, and in the medieval tradition, there's something called continuous profections, where they were using quadrant charts and the specific degree of the ascendant rather than a 0 degree for a whole sign perspective. And I think I'll show you a little bit of that too before we're done. Much to do. So in the monthly profections, when I go to now, you will see here in this beautiful Astro Gold software that I am currently here in March 9th in this Leo year. It's the 5th month of the year, okay? But I'm Gemini rising, so this is my 3rd sign, right? Well, why is that interesting? Okay, so the sun's said to be the lord of the month, and Mars, the lord of the year. And here they are with, at the time of the tooth falling out, I'm going to go back to that chart, although it's not too different. The crown falling out, right? Mars is squaring the sun. Now, Austin Coppock, in his work on the decans or the faces, calls this face, which is the first 10 degrees of Scorpio, where my sun resides. It's a face that's said to be ruled by Mars, in actually a couple different systems. This is the traditional system of planetary rulerships for the decans, which is keyed to the so-called Chaldean order, or Ptolemaic order of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, slowest to fastest, and then back out again. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, like that. There's correspondences with tarot cards, at least since the Golden Dawn or Rider-Waite system, where this particular decan or face of Scorpio is keyed to the 5 of Cups. All right, and you got to remember, though 3 have spilled, 2 are still full. If you're familiar with that image, oh, that should be not too far from here. I drew that from my card of the day. Oh, here, let me stop the screen share and I'll show you this one. The 5s in the tarot are having a hard time, which is a weird thing to play with for those of us like myself who are also students of the Pythagorean tradition, where the 5 is the number of love. So that's just kind of an interesting card to see. So, but what's the face? Anyway, so Austin Coppock describes that face as the jaw. He speaks about the art of chewing, as like the most violent human act. Is a really fun bit that he speaks about in his decans class, which I highly recommend. austincoppock.com for that one. And so I'm interested, like, in considering this decan, because Mars squaring my natal sun, and in a Leo month of an Aries year, you see, so sun, Leo month of a Mars Aries year. And here we have Mars squaring the sun in the 6th of health. Also, sun is aligned to Saturn, who is teeth in the nativity, you see. And there's something about the jaw and eating, like that's why Austin uses the jaw. He's like, you're taking food and you're like breaking it apart and making it a part of you. It's a fun thing. You gotta hear him speak about it. It's one of many not only enlightening but hilarious parts of the transmission of that wonderful class on the decans. I'm on my way to Mexico, as I shared before, where my dear friend and amazing astrologer Ursula Stockter will be speaking about the faces or the decans as well, and specifically how they correspond with the minor arcana of the tarot, something my friend Gary Caton first turned me on to and that I've been exploring recently. Every day I look at where the sun and the moon are, I think of their corresponding faces through this transmission. I draw a card, I think of its face. This morning, by the way, I drew the sun, and I'm in this sun year, and I was contemplating, or sun month of a Mars year, which I was contemplating last night when my crown fell off my tooth. Okay. I wanted to see a thing. Okay, so, and when I'm in a Leo month, right, then not only is the sun said to be the Lord of the month, and we say pay particular attention to transits to and transits by the sun, who in Pisces is at the time transiting my natal Venus. Interestingly, Antisha, my natal Mercury, coming into square the natal moon, but the Sun Venus and the Jupiter Venus really comes into this as well, because this is also a matter of like cosmetics and beauty, right? Like I got a big hole where I used to have what at least looked like a tooth, and I'm also concerned about potential poisons and toxins. Like, fortunately, it doesn't like smell, it doesn't hurt, I don't have nerves, but I'm concerned about that, right? And I was recently told that traditionally even Venus can be associated with poison, so I want to look more into that. Neptune typically is in modern times, sometimes the moon in ancient times, and so looking at this applying Sun Neptune conjunction, which will happen during my Sun month, is interesting too. So how long is the Sun month? I got to say, I mean, this is typically what softwares do. It's really lazy astronomy, right? Like think about like in the Hellenistic times, this Gregorian calendar had not yet been invented. And so to move from not even the solar return date, which is really what this should be, and then just moving through the same calendar date of Gregorian months, it's like lazy astronomy. But what do? I'll show you what I do. And bless the software developers of our time. I couldn't do this, and instead of having to do calculations, this one's pretty easy. You just grab the birthday, you add the year, and then you do the same number, unless somebody's born on like the 30th, 31st. What do you do about February? ... Okay, what I'm interested in is whole sign aspects from the transiting sun to the natal sun, to bring us through what I call personal solar months. I think I can calculate mine here. No, that went away with a recent crash. But either way, you see sun at the time at 1846 Pisces, okay, which is 18 degrees beyond my natal sun of 056, and not quite would be right now. Okay, so I look at that as like the sun has already trined my natal sun in the opening side of the year. That's 5 months. Trine is 5. And so I'm now 5 months from Aries, where I began this year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's Leo. And specifically, I'm now 18 degrees or 17 and a bit degrees through Leo. So this is the idea of a continuous perfection. Now, the difference is I'm doing it from a whole sign point of view. The difference from what? The difference from a more traditional approach, a medieval approach, which I recently learned was done thanks to the brilliance of Martin Ganston's work, and also the gift of AstroSeek online, which is a wonderful place. I'm going to tune you into these things, these circumambulations, in a bit. But I could also, in their work, find not only my annual perfections, which is Aries. I can go here and open a perfections page, and there I can get to my monthly perfections, and we're going to see that same thing moving every kind of 24th. If I do 12 months in the year, I will find that I'm right now in this Leo month, as we saw in the Astro Gold printout. There's another system where they do 28-day months, so you get 13 in a year, which I also would be in Leo, but towards the end. Many ways to pet the cosmic cat. I prefer one sign per month, and I define those months as what I call personal solar months of the sun in its whole sign aspects to the natal sun, including semisextiles and quincunxes. All right, that's a lot of astrology, and I know that's like too much language probably for some of y'all, but stick with it. And for some of you, you're like, okay, move along. All right, so let's do that. Look at medieval continuous perfections, which is pretty cool. And so there you'll see, what would be the thing to look at? Do they show me the ascendant? Right. So the ascendant here, a specific distance through the sign of Aries becomes particularly interesting to me. It's actually earlier than I would have expected to see it. Huh. And there should be settings here where I can probably medieval continuous perfections, 30 degrees for 1 year. We could also do 360 degrees for a year. And that's going to get close to what I call the day of the month perfection, which I'm just going to tune you into in another way. But I'm interested in just seeing what this software shows in that regard. Ascendant in Gemini, it's surprising to me. Super surprising to me. Anyway, I'm going to show you what I do. And we'll come back to AstroSeek in a bit to speak about circumambulations. What I'm interested in is this. So if I'm moving through Aries for the whole year, like the profected ascendant through Aries for the whole year, what if it moves from 0 Aries to the end of the sign, right? Which it would reach at my solar return in 2022. See what I'm doing there? And therefore, where am I in that mix at this point in time? And what you do is you say, how many days between October 23rd, 2022 and March 8th, 2023? I started in the wrong year, so just, okay, 136 days. Okay. And then we say, all right, well, what percentage of a year is 136? I mean, we're going to see that it's around a third of the year, because I've moved from Aries to Leo, right? A trine, that's like a third of the zodiac. So let's just do 136 days divided by the days in a year will give me the percentage of the year that we've moved through so far. 3-7 is a very solar number, by the way, and 2-3-7, which I can play with in there, is very lunar. Anyway, now this is more than a third, right? And a third of a sign is 10 degrees, so it's a little bit more than that. And I can find out exactly just by multiplying this ratio times, or this decimal times the number of degrees in a sign. And we get 11.17 degrees. I mean, I could do the same and say, okay, what is that decimal times the 60 minutes of a sign? And then I'm at like 11 degrees and 11 minutes, which is just fun. Kiss an angel. So why does that matter? Well, if I'm currently, this is what I call continuous daily whole sign perfections or distributed perfections, I'm at 11 Aries on my way to 0 Taurus, which will begin at my solar return next year. Hello, Chiron, right? Hello, Mercury in my nativity. Hello, Pluto. And by the way, I don't even want to show you, but there's some situation here which is really black. And in like traditional astrology, that would be very Saturn. In modern times, maybe more Pluto, especially because I'm concerned of like what's underneath there. And do I need to deal with this now? Like there's a lot of Pluto going on. You see what I mean? And hidden things. And so I guess I'll leave that at that, but I'm not surprised to find that this technique, which I've just vetted, I'll be teaching it, by the way, and showing some of the statistical analysis that I've utilized to kind of vet it over the course of the last year. At the coming ESAR conference in August this year, I'll be teaching this idea of day of the year and day of the month distributed profections, as well as a workshop after the conference, a post-conference workshop on astrolocality. Amazing thing is I'm going to be teaching profections, me show you this. This is like funny. I just realized this the other day when I was speaking with Laura Nalbandian about the conference. It's kind of around here. Let's just do this. Westminster, Colorado. I'm teaching profections. I'm in the 11th house year, and there's Jupiter. And when I was born, Aries, and therefore Jupiter, was rising in Colorado. It's something I've experienced. I lived there for some time and started a band that kind of blew up pretty quickly there. It's going to be an Aries Jupiter rising thing. There was also significant burnout and blowing up in terrible ways, and I could go on and on and on. But it's hilarious to me that I recently discovered, I didn't plan on this, but I'm teaching profections, and I'm in an 11th house year, and there's Jupiter, who's in my natal 11th, returning to the 11th in Aries, and Jupiter was rising in Colorado in Aries when I was born, and that's happening again, like in that place every day while I'll be there. I'm like, as we say, you can't make this stuff up. And that, of course, includes when Mars opposes Saturn, having a crown fall out of your mouth. Okay, so daily distributed perfections is another thing that I'm interested in. And that idea would be, if I go whole sign, well, sometime here, this is saying February 24th, I entered Leo for the month. So Sun becomes the chronocrator or Lord of the month. And then March 24th, I'll move into Virgo, and then Mercury takes over, you see. But again, like this astronomy, for me, it's not good enough. Like the way that I find this is I'll say, okay, when did the Sun in Pisces trine my natal Scorpio Sun? Buttons. And we find that was actually February 19th. Now look at that. That's 5 days off from February 24th. All right, so that's a big deal. Right? That's like a large percentage of a month. So be careful with these things. These like Gregorian calendar printouts is my invitation to you. It's interesting to see that aligned here where I live. Well, the Sun was rising and Jupiter about to and whatnot. But so for me, that's when my Leo month began. And it's interesting then to see Mercury, who had recently stationed direct, returning to pretty much the degree of the zodiac where he conjoined Sun to begin this recent Aquarius cycle at my part of Daimon. There are a lot of spirit, interestingly, with Saturn at the midheaven. How do I want to get back to Sun, trine, Sun? So Mercury was back there at the time. And because I'm Gemini rising, I'm always going to be particularly interested in what up with Mercury. So what other things do we see at this time? Jupiter's coming in on the opposition with natal Venus. Uranus, it's going to be a while, but it has gotten that far, like it's trine the natal Venus. Here's the Venus-Mars conjunction forming. Actually, we're just after the Mars-Venus conjunction. I was up taking pictures of this, I think that morning. They're trining the natal Venus. I'm really interested in the kind of cosmetic nature of the tooth and some of the Virgo and like health stuff of the tooth as well. Maybe some of you are seeing things that I'm missing and I don't want to get stuck on this chart anyway, but that's why I say I began this month, February 19th. Okay, and then that the next month for me will be again at the next whole sign aspect from transiting Sun to natal Sun, which is Sun quincunx natal Sun, March 21st. Right, so at that point, we're 3 days away from this 24th of March. And so I encourage you to check out your monthly perfections if you're into it, through timing them with whole sign aspects from the transiting Sun to your natal Sun, which I call your personal solar months. Okay. At this time, I will be in Mexico teaching, so stoked about it and wondering if I need to deal with this tooth before or after. So that's something I'm going to be investigating. This thing's already so much longer than I intended for it to be. But but who's counting? If you're here, I assume you're enjoying yourself. All right, so how far into this month am I? If this month, as I believe, began with Sun trine Sun, the 5th month of this particular year for me, on February 19th, well, how many days have gone by since? And I'll just ask the phone. How many days have passed since February 19th? It was 18 days ago. I'm afraid to open this text I just saw. Oh my gosh. Wow. So we started this listening to the music of Eric Deutsch, and I just received a text from him that one of our teachers and an amazing educator and performer of music, jazz, a great trumpet player, Ron Miles, has just died. I want to show an image of Ron. Just to honor this amazing, amazing man. One of the most gentle, beautiful, and gentle and powerful beings I have ever had the honor to meet and to know, to be taught by. All right, Ron, thank you, sir. I'm going to be spending a lot of time there today. Eric says he's been in the hospital since November. And given the craziness of our time, I hope that means that his family has been allowed to see him and all that. So your assignment, friends, is to go listen to Ron Miles. It won't be hard to find the music of Ron Miles, thankfully. He was very much recognized for his genius. There's a lot of records of the great guitarists, maybe the greatest guitarist of our day, Bill Frisell, where you can find Ron playing there, Bill on Ron's records. They spent a lot of time together in Denver, where Ron is. So it's interesting that I just kind of went to Colorado and playing in a band there who was very much educated by Ron to begin a song with Eric, who was in that band of mine. Oh, and I actually just received some shows where Ron played with us on DAT tape. So I'm going to be listening to that today and crying a bunch. And so there's another way, by the way, where Mars opposite Saturn and that kind of elder teacher being that Saturn can be. It's coming alive for me. And Saturn and Leo in the 3rd. So maybe that's the end. No, let's continue here. Okay. So 18 days into this solar month, we'll have me in my work at 18 degrees Leo. Oh, nothing there. Wait a second, opposite transiting Saturn. So once again, like this technique that I found my way to and then found is something that was done at least in the medieval time, this continuous profections, but they're going in a different way. I'm actually kind of lost as to why that ascendant would be in Gemini here. I've got to play with this. Oh, this is perfections for October 24th, 2021. I see. That's why it's a different time. So let's go March 9th, 2022. And this will be a continuous kind of annual perfection image. And so you'll see that ascendant here in Libra. That's also actually shocking. I better just put this away, but it's calling me to go study later. Those are the kind of things where I'll just study through trial and error, cast a bunch of charts and try to crack the code. But in the system that I'm using, that I just came to by seeing how true this was in natal charts, like this would actually be one of the times of the year that I would kind of tell a client about. That's like, okay, hey, what about when you're perfecting through the house where Saturn resides and you get to the degree that's aligned with transiting Saturn at the time? Now this is February 19th where I am, so let me go now. But you'll see Saturn's very much there. Excuse me. Back to this crown fell out chart. All right. And so it's actually, and this is interesting to me, when is the 20th day from, what did we see in the Sun trine Sun? February 19th. What is 20 days after February 19th, 2022? Just asking the phone makes it easy. March 11th. So Fukushima date. So maybe on March 11th, which is tomorrow, right? 2 days from now, on Friday, that's actually one of the days that I might go see my beloved Anna's sister-in-law to have this tooth removed so that it doesn't remove itself while I'm touring around Mexico. And I'm going to show you a little bit of that in the chart too. But before I do, let me show you another thing. So I've been kind of also honing in on this Jupiter-Venus thing, which perfected. So Jupiter opposite Venus. And as I said before, like there's other ways where this is definitely demonstrating in my life. The exact opposition was on March 5th in the afternoon. It's very much in slide building place. Check out the Venus-Mars, 2 arc minutes away at that time, at the moon on the square, at my prenatal syzygy, at Chiron, always wheels within wheels within wheels with this thing. And then when I get back to when the tooth loosened up, which was the day after this in the morning, Jupiter still, very close. And then when it fell out last night or this morning, we find Jupiter still partile, meaning within the same degree of this opposition. And that Venus, my natal Venus degree was very close to the local midheaven at the time. I mean, this might have actually happened when 1503 Virgo was culminating here. And I had just gone outside actually before I went and flossed my tooth and looked in the stars and checked in with the midheaven and saw the lion there and knew Virgo was culminating. Interestingly, I was like, hey, that's where Venus lives at my birth. So Jupiter is extra active at this time in my life also. There's a couple of reasons for that from the old chronocrator systems. One, I'm in an Aries year. Jupiter resides in Aries in my nativity. So it's not just about Mars, who rules the 11th sign of my chart, who's activated through annual perfection since I'm in an 11th house year or 11th sign year to speak whole signs. But it's also Jupiter, because Jupiter resides in that sign in my chart and in my natal chart. And Mars and Jupiter have some interesting generosity or mixed reception, with Jupiter, who's said to be exalted in Cancer, and Mars, who's said to rule Aries. They're very far from a square. The square actually would not perfect or testify, because Mars stationed retrograde shortly after my birth and left the sign. And Mars, interestingly, is at like the midpoint in my nativity of a Venus-Jupiter biquintile. So this is actually just a Mars quintile Jupiter and Venus quintile Mars, and I could go on and on and on. It's just interesting connections between them. And I was really blessed to receive a reading this morning from Michael Ofek, where we were speaking a lot about some of the kind of the traditional conditions that connects them, including that from a traditional point of view, this moon is not void, of course, but rather is translating the light of Jupiter to Mars when I was born. Although that's not quite true, because moon would first see the sun and the bounds of the moon and all sorts of interesting things that I increased my knowledge about this morning, thanks to Michael's genius. All right, so where do I want to be? Right, so Jupiter as a Time Lord, also a little bit more Mars. So let me show you the zodiacal releasing at the time. And I just had a loosing of the bonds. Right? So like, what, you really cannot make this shit up. In Capricorn, all right, which is Saturn, which is teeth, among many other things. And actually in this reading this morning, Michael's principal advice was, more Saturn, more Saturn, more Saturn. And how amazing. I wonder if he had seen this. We didn't talk about the zodiacal releasing. We were meant to have our session some time ago, but then it started this morning at 8 a.m. We went late, 10 a.m. I mean, right here. The zodiacal releasing can be creepy accurate and on point. So I'm not going to explain how all of this works, but I just want to show you like the major period I'm in, which is called the peak period. It's an Aries or 11 sign period. Here we're releasing from the lot of spirit. And because my spirit's in Aquarius, this could also be seen as Aries as the third of Aquarius, although these peaks are actually defined from fortune. So it's a little bit more about seventh, because Aries is the seventh sign of Libra, where fortune resides in my nativity. And that's about as much as I can do with that right now. We're going to be here for another hour. So I'm in a long Aries period, Mars period. And since that period began in 2017, I've moved Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. Okay, well, Mars resides in Cancer in my nativity, right? I'm about to shift, as you can see, out of this peak period that's been going on for about 2 years. Right before my solar return in October, I'll kind of get to hopefully ride the wave of what I've built up during this time. And then I move into, interestingly, a Leo period within the Aries period, which kind of feels like this Leo month of an Aries year and the profections. And it's a very different technique, but there's kind of a similar way where we can mix with two different chronocrators or time lords determined by these signs of these different periods. And we can divide this period by 12. This is like 360-day periods multiplied by strange coefficients for these different signs or planets that rule them. A 12th of that is 30 days multiplied by the coefficients. Moon gets 25, so this is 25 months. A 12th of 30 days is 2.5 days, where moon gets 25 times 2.5 days, which is 50 some 70 something days, right? And then I'm currently in this period. So what happens is you move, if you're in a period long enough, that moves all the way through the zodiac. When you get back to the sign, or when you're about to get back to the sign where you began, we say it has a loosing of the bond and it jumps to the other side. So interestingly, that literally happened for me this morning, right? This would actually be East Coast time. So it was 4:39 a.m. Here in California. I mean, it's just 4 hours after my tooth loosened from its bond and fell out. Excuse me. Oh my God, so crazy. So now this becomes interesting too, because I leave for my trip on March 15th, and I'll be in Mexico first with Anna for a few days until the 20th. She flies home, and then I go more into teacher mode, retreat leader mode, co-leader, co-teacher thing. And that's going to go through this Pisces, then Aries period. And I come back in this Taurus period. And so I'm just kind of looking at different timing techniques that might say a thing or two about whether I need to get this fixed before I get on a plane or if it's okay to do it when I return. I'm really on the fence right now and waiting to talk to the dentist about it. Okay, well, there's another technique and I'm showing it here. This would be a fast way to show it. This is called circumambulations or primary directions or distributions through the bounds. There's many different calculations, many ways to pet the cosmic cat at all times. This one's called the Ptolemy key, which I quite enjoy just because it's so simple to teach. The general idea here is the world did not stop spinning for me. All right. So here's the moment of my birth. And after Gemini rises, well, what if we just go an hour later? It'll still be Gemini, but a later degree. Maybe that moon comes up to the horizon, you see? Then what? Cancer is going to rise. And then Leo is going to rise. Right now I'm clicking through hours. But the Ptolemy key equates 4 minutes of the spinning sky with 1 year of life. It's like, what? Because look, that means that 6 minutes is 90 years. And so like the whole thing is mapped out within like 6 hours is 90 years. So 6 hours of your life kind of determines the whole map through this technique, which is trippy. And why 4 minutes? Because it's kind of equivalent to 1 degree, especially if we're looking at right ascension instead of longitude, but you can also see it by longitude to zodiac degree. It takes just about 4 minutes for every degree to culminate at the midheaven. It's really more like 3 minutes and 56 seconds. One would be tropical, the other sidereal. That's the difference between the Ptolemy key and the Nibod key. Some are doing this through ascensional times. Where I'm at in the mix right now, it doesn't really matter which of these many calculations I choose to use. I'm in a very long Jupiter period. The question is, when did it begin and when will it shift off to Saturn? And you might wonder why, when this says Cancer, why is it a Jupiter period? And the answer is this. It's called the Egyptian terms, which are these very strange asymmetric divisions of the signs. And actually, when I was born, Gemini rising, so we look towards Mercury, but the specific zone of the sign of Gemini is said to be in the face or the decan of Jupiter, because Jupiter traditionally is said to rule the first 10 degrees of Gemini. And it's also in the bounds of Jupiter. If you use, well, actually both the system, like these are the Ptolemaic bounds, and these are the Egyptian bounds, or these are also called terms. They're very confusing things. I struggle with them because what are they? Where do they come from? Why? I also, my midheavens in the Jupiter terms of Aquarius, but I'm intrigued by them. And I'll just show you that I am now 46. Well, I'm about 46.3. I'm a fifth of the way through this year. I can use actually profections to show me this pretty easily on Astro Gold, because they conveniently show you your age. So I'm like between 46.3 and 46.4. Well, if I use the Ptolemy key, that age of life is going to correspond with that number times 4 minutes after my birth. In other words, 185.4 minutes. Okay. So that's 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 20 seconds. All right. So I'm going to do that after my birth. 3 hours. What was it? 4 minutes and 20 seconds, right? Yeah. Thanks to Astro Gold for making this so easy to do. Some softwares will just calculate them for me, and thanks to Astro Seek for letting me access that for free. Classic Ron Miles right there. Okay. So currently I have this kind of 22 Cancer rising thing. It wasn't too long ago where, according to these directions, Jupiter would have cast array or square the Cancer ascendant. And you can actually see that here. This is according to the calculations of ascensional times. I'm using Ptolemy's key of 4 minutes of spinning sky is equal to 1 year of life, which is like 1 degree equals 1 year. We see that in the technique of progressions as well, and solar arc directions, which is a popular modern technique you may know. So the Jupiter square was March 4th, 2017. And then 19 Cancer started rising according to the Ptolemy key of calculations, March 21st, 2018. And I won't move from the bounds of Jupiter here in the sign of Cancer, in the Egyptian terms, to the bounds of Saturn until December 8th, 2026, according to the Ptolemy key. According to the Nibod key, it'll happen later in 2027. So maybe I should convert to the Nibod key first. And according to ascensional time calculations, a little bit earlier in 2026. But either way, it's a ways out. It's like pure Jupiter right now, okay? And so you've seen how much attention I've been giving to the Jupiter-Venus opposition at the time of this crown falling out this morning or last night. Because again, there's like significant Venus in here. And actually that will help me, like tuning into Venus and to Jupiter will help me kind of make some decisions about, should I get this thing, this remainder of this tooth pulled and then deal with like a hole in Mexico, or get it dealt with before I get back. The decision would be, astrologically, what I'm looking for is, does it look like this is going to get worse? So what about looking at the transits between now and then? And also looking at some of those things like I shared, like the daily distributions. Let's see, I have Sun quintile, my natal sun. Sorry, quincunx, my natal sun, coming soon. That's March 21st. Okay, so while I'm in Mexico, I will move into the Virgo month of this Aries year. Well, and you see Mercury and Jupiter opposite Venus, who resides in that sign, which is ruled by Mercury. You can see Venus trining the natal Mercury and Mars trining the natal Mercury at that time. I'm not too concerned about those. I am wondering about Mercury, those, at least in the medieval tradition, said to be in exile in Pisces, but in Hellenistic times also in fall in Pisces. Why? Especially because if I think of my ascendant in Aries this year by profection, then Virgo becomes the 6th. Virgo is the 6th of Aries. So that'll be a month where maybe health is particularly alive. And look at where the moon is at the time in the natal 6th and in the 8th of the year, right? So like that alone might say, dude, go get your tooth pulled now before you leave, and then deal with the pain. Michael and I, when we were talking about this in this reading this morning, it was great. It's like, you know, that's like a way where you can kind of magically give a place for Mars to do his thing. Like Mars can be surgery, right? So I'm like, I feel that. I want to look at these zodiacal releasings as well and just see that, well, here I am now, this loosing of the bond just began. And I'll be in this Aquarius period. Let's look at March 14th, who's there, but the Lord of the year, Mars. Okay, so, oh, now and days and here. So Monday, it's a moon day, and I get a moon in Leo and the sign of the month opposite Mars that morning. I don't move into the Aquarius period by zodiacal releasing until 10:39 p.m. Eastern, but that's kind of concerning. It's nice to see Venus there between Mars and Jupiter as the moon's moving through, by the way. But yeah, I mean, just there's some things here I hadn't looked yet. I thought I would do that live, where it's kind of pushing me towards go get this dealt with now, or else you might be unhappy in Mexico. So another thing is, since Mars is kind of extra activated for me this year, I'm interested in when does this transiting Mars square Uranus perfect? Oh, and it looks like, well, I'm going to be down there. So transit Mars square transit Uranus. My tooth like starting to hurt as I'm saying this. Told you I was a hypochondriac. So that's March 22nd. I'm actually kind of leading the retreat the next day on the 23rd. Yeah, it's like kind of my day. There's 4 teachers and we each kind of get a day. So yeah, I mean, maybe that's that, right? Maybe that's, hey, squaring Uranus in the 12th, and I'm teaching about hidden things, and Aquarius is the place of teaching, and great, you know? But in regards to the health stuff, should I deal with them? I'm also interested in Venus, quincunx Venus at the time. And there's other things to see that I'm seeing, but I don't want to, but I'll leave it there. Okay. So then we get into Pisces. Actually, I'm in a Pisces period by the time I'm teaching. And then a Mars Aries period, which is a peak period within this loosening of the bonds. Yeah, that tells me to do it now. Okay. There's some other things in the transiting picture, also in like the daily profections. Like if I just use this map, but I remember this was actually the 19th and this was the 21st. At the 21st, I'll move into the Virgo, right? I think I just discussed that being in the 6th month of the year while I'm down there, and the potential health implications, especially with Mercury in the opposite sign in exile and fall, somewhat concerning. And I mean, I can get into progressions and directions and other techniques, okay? But the other piece is, like, I'll just look at how many days between October 23rd, 2021 and March 23rd, 2022? And we get 151 days, which is 0.41 of a year, and that percentage of a sign is 12.4 degrees. So I just come right to my Mercury while I'm in a Mercury month. And it doesn't have to be disastrous or something. And then when I'm in early degrees of Virgo, I mean, it's a sextile to the natal Mars. There's a quincunx to the transiting sun. There's nothing there that's like particularly freaking me out. And I don't want to do freak me out astrology anyway. So I'm going to finish up by just sharing a quick thing about derived houses, which I find amazing right now. As I shared before, I might have the opportunity to have this tooth pulled by my partner's sister-in-law, my partner's brother's wife. Where is my partner's brother's wife on my chart? Do you know? Where's the partner? The partner is 7th house, yeah? Sag, right? So Jupiter in my chart represents partnership and specifically my partner. Okay, well, where is her brother? And there's 2 ways to go here, literally this way or that way, okay? Because siblings are the 3rd, right? Here. So Leo in the sun represents my sister, maybe. My sister's older than me. So is she my sister or am I her brother? And it's literally would determine which way I go. My sister might be represented by, right? So Aries and Mars, right? Because I go from there 1, 2, 3, and that's the ascendant, and that's me, Mercury. So that's an interesting thing to consider. For Anna, her brother is also older than her. He is the middle sibling of 3, and Anna's the youngest. So instead of saying that her brother, let's go this way first, the sibling of the partner is the 3rd of the 7th. Remember to start from 1, not from 0. Everything starts with 1. So we go 7, 8, 9 as 1, 2, 3 from my partner's place. Okay. So he might be represented by Aquarius here, which is interesting because he's like a computer dude. And then that's Saturn and Leo, right? Aquarius. And then where would why did I get to Saturn? Saturn rules Aquarius. But another thing I would do is, the dentist is my partner's brother's partner. So my partner, the seventh, her brother, the third of the seventh, 1, 2, 3 is the ninth. His partner, the seventh of the third of the seventh, right? The seventh of the third of the seventh, the partner of the brother of my partner. So my partner, her brother, his partner, Leo. And I'm in a Leo month, Saturn there, and I'm communicating with her while literally Mars is opposing my Saturn, which is the nature of this chair, right? Okay. Now I could go the other way, and this also becomes quite interesting. Because again, Anna is the younger sibling of her brother. So if I went that way, then I would see her brother as Libra. Okay, why? Because from Libra, 1, 2, 3. Sagittarius is the third of Libra. Sagittarius is my partner. It's many other things too, but it's my partner, right? And so my partner's older brother might be this Libra, ruled by Venus. And Virgo Venus could also be that computer cat. Like I could see him going both ways, by the way. But if he is represented by the Libra house, the older brother of my partner, then his partner would be Aries, right? The seventh of Libra, Mars, which is probably the cat that I want. I want either Saturn or Mars. And either way, I do these things, right? If I go right now, what's happening right now? But Mars is opposing my Saturn. So guess who I'm just about to call? I think probably I want to get this thing pulled, and let's look just to finish up here. Mars opposite natal Saturn, and that is perfecting there at 9 a.m. this morning. Also wondering about Mars conjoined Saturn, transiting Saturn. That's going to be a bit. April 4th. So I'll be back then. Like that might be when this happens. It depends on, I think, her advice. But so far, the astrology has me leaning towards go deal with it now and deal with like the pain and keeping it clean while I'm traveling in Mexico, rather than having like another level of sudden, perhaps towery Mars Uranus go down. Then I should just show one more thing. As you've seen in my nativity, I have Sun, Saturn, Uranus. So Mars is currently squaring Saturn, as I'm describing the astrology of this whole thing, is just squared my natal Uranus. Well, as we like to say, you can't make this shit up. Hopefully you've enjoyed this trip through not only transits, a technique most modern students of astrology are familiar with, but some of the old techniques, Time Lord techniques, chronocrator techniques, which I'm relatively new to and very much learning and will continue to learn because it's deep. But how they show us that planets are like supercharged at times, which can make their transits, or the transits they give or receive, extra powerful. And I would say that though I received some advice to deal with this tooth a couple of years ago, and maybe even 4 years ago before that, when Mars opposed my Saturn, that this is the time where the crown fell from the tower. Okay, so managed to get through that while really I'm just in this place of heavy heart. And it's time for me to go grieve a bit and then really deeply celebrate the life and the music of the great Ron Miles. That being said, maybe I will end this with a song by Ron. And I'm surprised not to see Ron songs in my So I'm just finding a song by Ron that I've never heard called Rainbow Song. And that feels really good to tune into. That's a record and a song. There's actually a song called Queen of the South. That's the one I'm going to listen to. I'm not going to play it live here because that could have all sorts of copyright complications come in. But I encourage you to go find this song, Queen of the South, on the record Rainbow Sign by the great Ron Miles, and just drop in. And then I hope that will inspire you to listen to all sorts of the amazing genius of Ron Miles. I will miss him a lot, again, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, literally, perhaps the most gentle human being I've ever met, especially considering the level of this man's mastery. Thanks for spending some time with me here today, friends. Love and planets to you. I will see you in space.